Hello everybody, Tim here with video 2 in the RodLab video tutorial series. This one I'm going to talk about taper files and some basic taper entry techniques. So let's go back. If you remember when we installed the program, we created this folder structure under My PC in the Documents area. We've got RodLab folder and beneath that a taper folder. And in that taper folder we've got a bunch of .taper.xml files. And XML is an extensible markup language. It's a simple HTML similar language, and the nice thing about this is it's a very easy way to create a file structure because the computer can read it, but you can also look at it yourself by opening it with a text editor. I'm using Notepad here, and if you look, it kind of looks like HTML. You've got these tags, you've got numbers that are for the taper, you got a whole bunch of other stuff in here. I'm going to tell you, I never edit tapers this way. It's not that useful or very helpful, but the reason I did it this way or created the file structure this way is if somebody sends you a XML file and it gets corrupted in an email or by some other means, you might be able to extract the information manually and create a new file. But like I said, something I never do. The more useful way would be to open RodLab, and I'm going to click this Enter New Taper. So this will bring up a dialog where we can go ahead and enter some taper data points, and I'm going to do it the easy way the first time, which is I'm going to copy an existing taper. So I've got this Dickerson 7613 1950 version, and you'll notice it comes up with a rod name as copy of. It's really good to go ahead and make that whatever you're going to use for your final name right away. And I'm going to change this into Russ Gooding's LT version of the taper. So starting off at the top here, I've got my length, cross-section type, could be quad or rectangular, but it's hexagonal is correct. Rod sections 2, line weight 5. Casting distance is somewhat important when we go to translate tapers. We're going to be using that to translate the taper. When we're bending, we'll be able to assign a casting distance for various bending runs, so that'll come up in the near future here. Tip-top weight and grains, varnish density, and the grip pivot point is important for bending because this is the point where you would hold on to the rod, so we assume anything below that point is not going to be bending because there's no load on it. And I already see a mistake. We'll go back and fix this in a minute. My existing Dickerson 7613 has a Super Z ferrule, but it's almost certainly a step down that this file had, this taper had when it was mic'd. So I've changed that, and now it's given me the correct dimensions for a step-down ferrule here. And looking over to the right, I've got some other stuff here. Hollow wall. I've got a hollow wall of 1 inch, which is meaningless because the taper doesn't go out to 1 inch, obviously. This just means it's a solid rod. I've got some hollow tooling. That really doesn't have any meaning or any use because we're not hollowing this rod. And OB ratio is another thing which is very confusing. That's actually for rectangular rods that have a different height versus width. But because this is a hexagonal rod, it has no meaning. And in the future, I've left it here for hex rods because in the future we might do some tri-hex, in which case we could come up with a use for the overbuild ratio. But looking down below, here's my guide setup and spacing. Guide masses are somewhat important. We're going to put those on the rod and they will tell us how the rod bends as we cast. There's a bunch of tools for picking where the rods go or where the guides go and at what point we'll look at those a little bit later. There's a paste box below. This is where if I had information from a taper that was maybe on a website or somewhere else in an email, I'd be able to cut and paste it in here and then it would automatically populate the boxes. We'll look at that again. And down below here, so these are all my taper points that I already had in my Dickerson 7613 taper. And from what I know of Russ Gooding's taper is he took about 0.02 off the tip section. So let's go out to the classic bamboo rod making forum rather, and this is Russ's taper right here. And what you'll notice is I've actually highlighted this section, so anything above this section toward the tip is going to be 0.02 off. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use actually a Varnish method. So this is a way that if you had mic'd a taper and put it into a spreadsheet but your dimensions were off because it had varnish, you could come in here and quickly take off a certain amount. So I'm going to take 0.02 off the whole rod, and when I say apply varnish adjustment, you will see down below all of these numbers will be adjusted downward by 0.02. And that's good, except that this one is only adjusted downward 2,000ths at the tip. So what I'm going to do, back up 66 correct, 88, 102, 120, 138, 153, 168, 178, 196, 206 is all correct, but now when I get to 211, Russ's dimension is actually 214. And keep moving up, 218 becomes 232. And then 236 becomes 248. And then 254 becomes 266. And then 272 becomes 278. And then 286 becomes 288. 308 becomes 334. 353 becomes 350. And 358 becomes 360. Oops. 360. So now I've added all this information, and this is all correct, I believe, for this taper. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this off, and when I do, what I put in for the title now becomes the file name, so I will hit save. And that was actually going to be it for this tutorial, but I'm going to show you now really quickly how to go ahead and correct my Dickerson 7613. So let's go back out, we'll close this, and then we'll reopen it, and that way all the data I had before is going to be gone. And I'm going to do a copy existing taper, Dickerson 7613, the one we were just looking at. And as you see, I've got that super Z right here. That's wrong, I want step down. And now this taper should be correct, and I'm going to get rid of the copy of. And I'm going to save taper. And when I do this, there's already a taper there with that name. I'm just going to overwrite it. And that's it. In the next video, we'll talk about some little more advanced ways of cutting and pasting data in and what we'll want to do with that. Thank you.